All right, I'm starting 15 seconds before class because we have a ton to do. First thing, there seems to have been some confusion about the essay portion of the exam. You can, in fact, actually do it at home, right? So you don't have to memorize your text evidence lines and stuff. So everybody clear on that now? Any other questions about it? Because hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end of class to talk a little bit more about the exam, but I doubt it. Any other questions at all? Meaning of life? All right. All right, so let's, nice short article for a change, huh? Clear, to the point. It'll, I actually didn't do that on purpose, but I was gonna cancel the whole thing, but I looked at the article and I was like, they can do this. This will take an hour. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
What reason? Number 9. What reason did Orgel give for Shakespeare changing the character of Banquo?
He was related to James.
Did you get that?
No.
He was related to James, who was the king at the time. Yes, sir.
Who did Orgel think revised Macbeth after 1614? Was that David?
Anyone know? Somebody else.
Just someone not Shakespeare.
Yeah, someone not Shakespeare.
I got it right.
20. Oh wait, never mind. I answered that. Never mind.
All right. Yeah.
How do the witches open up a space for women?
Yes, sir.
I said that by presenting them as ambiguous in gender, it puts them on equal footing with men. I don't know.
I like that. I think that's smarter than what's in the article, but I'll accept that. You could tell he was. What I got from that is that he's kind of an old school guy, and then the old school guys during the '80s took a beating from the feminists, so they all had to throw in little cookies to their feminist colleagues in their article to keep them from jumping on them. I have a feeling that was one of those moves. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Why is Lady Macbeth as much as a problem as the other woman? Number 14.
Why is Lady Macbeth as big of a problem as the other women? Yes, sir.
She's disruptive.
Specify.
He couldn't go and serve as king if he's at home taking care of his wife and kid.
Yeah, that's the problem is women. It's not necessarily whether they're seducing you or heaping responsibilities on you. Yes, sir.
Who killed Macbeth in battle historically? I know that it's Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't quite figure out why Shakespeare gave credit to Macduff. I thought something about keeping Malcolm like as a king sort of clean of the act. But
Yeah, that was something that the article wasn't clear on. It's kind of a thinker for you. Something like that might be on the test, so it's worth chewing on and trying to figure out a possible reason for that. Yeah.
I thought the article said something about like Malcolm was tainted by women and Macbeth isn't, so he acts as an agent for Malcolm.
Well, but Malcolm's not tainted by women, and Macduff is, though, right?
He's not. He wasn't a woman born.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's in there. Yeah. It's amazing how everybody reads the same article and nobody reads the same article. Yeah.
Was it the play making the point that that Malcolm needed someone else to do the dirty work for him while Macbeth was acting on his own?
I think that's my interpretation. So I'm tempted to agree with that one.
So wait, so he could stay with him and he had like someone do the dirty work?
Well, I mean, it was the kind of what we were talking about in class about how it's you have 3 different styles of kingship. There's the independent, kind of rogue Macbeth, and then there's the utterly dependent sort of infantile Duncan, and then there was Malcolm who's savvy, who got other people to do his killing and stuff for him, but was controlled knowledge and that sort of thing. Yes, sir.
So Lady Macbeth was the real heir to the throne, is that right?
That historically, yeah.
what happened? So how long did Macbeth actually reign? Like in real life?
I forget. It was longer than the. I mean, but how long does he reign in the play? There's this weird sort of no time that like it could be 2 days, it could be a year. It's really hard to tell. Yeah.
The play is a divestment. I said because the songs are supposed to be like sung and dance, and the witches scenes.
Does that seem right to you guys? Seems right to me. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. All right, as Queen Victoria said on her wedding night, let's get this over with. Thank you. Major difference between performances? Song and dance. What character in the play is King James a descendant of? Historically speaking, who killed Macbeth? Historically speaking, who would rightfully have been the king at the beginning of Macbeth? Uh-oh. Who would have been king?
Duncans.
Macbeth! Because he's married to Lady Macbeth. And Lady Macbeth can't be the king.
I thought it was a trick question. I thought you put king on purpose.
Yeah.
That's at least half a point.
Oh. Yeah. Was that?
Well,
I guess it must have been tricky if it fooled you. Well, I'll see. If most of you got it wrong, then I'll count it.
He was a steward, not a king.
No, he'd have been king. He would. I mean, it's a qualified king because yeah, you're sort of right, but sort of wrong. Because like the real king would be his son.
I'm arguing for the point.
You got the point. I'm kind of a pushover, I guess. Did the historical Macbeths have children?
Yes.
What makes you feel like a man? Murder. You should try it. What happens to Lady Macbeth when she succeeds at making a man of her husband? When, in relation to marriage, do Shakespeare's tragedies take place? Why does... see, I'm getting married this weekend. Why does Orgel think that our version of Shakespeare's play is the result of more authors than just Shakespeare?
Sorry, say that again?
Because it was an unpopular play, so people wanted to lighten it up.
Didn't he say the question?
The critics said, that one guy had seen the play, written something about it, and saw it again, and said that it was much improved. And I mentioned the inclusion of the diversements.
Yeah, that'll work.
Isn't there like things from other
Wasn't
stories?
two of the songs performed by the witches, don't they appear as famous after the play would have first been performed? I think that's what it says in there.
Yeah, there's any sort of this sort of evidence will be. Actually, can you put your computer away? Thanks. We have that no computer policy allegedly in here. Why, historically speaking, is the difference between a virginal birth and a cesarean section significant?
Because when a C-section happens, you're born by a male surgeon, and when it's a vaginal birth, you're born by midwives.
Right. Okay. Marvelous. And then according to you question, obviously it's going to be across the board. Yes, sir.
What was the answer to the one where she said the Macbeths had children?
Yeah, they did have children. Okay. So sort of tried to condense a lecture and a half into today.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay, I want to consider Macbeth's initial reaction at hearing the witch's prophecy, because remember we're going under the overall umbrella question of, are the Macbeths psychotic? Let's take a vote. Everybody, close your eyes. Psychotics? Not psychotic. Ooh, close. Some people voted both ways. All right, so do we know what psychotic is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't reflect on consequences or the consciousness. Isn't guilty.
Right. Doesn't acknowledge the personness of others. Yeah.
I was going to say they don't know the difference between right and wrong. Clearly, Macbeth knows it's wrong.
Yeah, we'll look at the evidence. All right. So the first thing I want to look at, and then the sort of separate question is Macbeth's schizophrenic. His initial reaction at hearing the witch's quote prophecy, which is Banquo's speech on page 9, 1-3, line 51. But if you remember, go ahead and tell me what's his initial reaction when he hears, according to Banquo's description.
He's disquieted.
Yeah.
And sort of troubled.
But he seems wrapped withal, just sort of, which Polanski does great things with, right? Because the weird thing about Macbeth's asides, and those of you in theater know that theatrical conventions can go either way, and with asides, they can sort of, everybody freezes and then you peer into the mind of the person thinking. And then, but here the kind of more comic thing is, like you peer into the mind of the person thinking, and then the guy who's on stage is like, "Hey man, what's going on? Where you at? Where you at?" Another sort of comic routine that nobody talks about that happens with Banquo. So what do you think that he's thinking? So he seems wrapped with all, just to the point where, and I mean this seems to have happened before, because Banquo's just like, oh, there's Macbeth wrapped again. So let's continue the conversation and wait till he comes back. What do you think he's thinking? He just found out that these weird bearded ladies, weird in the Viking sense, have told him that he's going to be some sort of thane, some sort of king, something like this, right? Is that it? I don't remember. No. Yeah. So so then he's wrapped, and then does anybody go to frequent psychics, or is anyone a psychic? Better yet, is anyone a psychic? I really like going to that big psychic fair in Sedona, and then I just adopt various different personalities, and I go and talk to different psychics, and like I can be Jed, the computer programmer, that and whatever, and then just getting the different psychic readings.
They give you like a billion different readings.
Yeah, they're it's not a very reliable thing. If there's actual genuine psychics out there, then I've never met them. But so at bottom, it's just a good psychic will just will pay attention to various cues, and the more of a stereotype you are, the righter they're going to be. But and there's ways of prodding, like, I think that you're going to be powerful, and then they're like, no, and it's like, well, metaphorically, and they're like, oh, and then just because our brains are just incredibly stupid, we'll pick up what we want to believe, and they'll be wrong 3/4 of the time, but you'll just leave with a real sense of profound. It's like, wow, she just peered into my soul. So it's just telling people what they want to hear in a framed, dramatic way. If you can elicit a belief. I used to know this parlor trick really well. Let's no, I better not.
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
That's because it's wasting time. It's so usually you can only it only works with groups of either 3 or 7 for some reason, but we can give it a try. So you've got to. There's no way I'm going to remember this. Forget it. We'll do it another time.
Tell us how many classes are
You can't do that.
I don't think I can remember.
I'm gonna write that down. Parlor trick.
I'll bring it in. We'll do it before the midterm. But I can guess what. I've only done it with 3 or 7 people. Okay, so pick a number with 2 digits. All right. They both have to be odd. They have to be a different size number. And the second one has to be bigger than the first one. Now concentrate really hard. Picture the number in your head. It's fuzzy. Just everybody concentrate at once. Is it 37?
Are you serious?
It's because of the 3 and the 7 people primed. Well, I didn't get everybody, but I got a lot of you. I had some 15s, but and then also with the also at work. Have you ever really had a really important decision to make, and then you go to the coin flip, and then what are the 2 outcomes? So say heads, I'm going to go out and party. B, I'm going to study. And you flip the coin, and it lands on heads. What's the reaction?
I should study.
No, seriously, because mine would be like, Jesus wants me to party. So heads is to go out and party.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah, and then you hit tails, and you're like, you know what? Flipping a coin is a stupid way of making a decision. And also like with advice, you know, I try to be more distant, but people always used to ask advice of me as if I was competent to give advice on anything. And but you know, you notice that they just go around and keep asking different people for advice until the person tells them what they wanted to hear, and then you know, like, oh, you're the best friend ever, and you know, like so. So is that what's going on with the witches? Maybe something like that. Yeah. So did he already have the fantasy? Probably. Yeah. Because like if I was like Cliff, I jump out of a bush and you've never seen me before. I'm like, you will be the donut king of Wisconsin. And then I go running off. And then unless you happen to have a fantasy of being the donut king of Wisconsin, which and frankly it wouldn't surprise me.
Like it's metaphorical.
Yeah, right. So he's this is going to be one of those times. All right, so let's go look, and then Ross comes in, and he's just barely being unwrapped. Ooh, that's funny, unRAPT. And then we get this on page 12, the 127, 2 truths are told, and happy prologues, the swelling act of the imperial theme. I thank you, gentlemen, the supernatural soliciting cannot be. So he switches to a side now, right? And then, of course, comically, everybody's watching him be wrapped. And so it can't be ill, can't be good. If ill, I'm giving you the commencing of truth. I am Thane of Cardor. If good, blah 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 blah. So the thing is this feeling of you know, like your desire. So the witches identified as desire, and then at least one of them came true, right? So that's cool, right? Like if you like wish something and it comes true, like magically, you don't even see a possibility of it. That's cool, right? Like why could that be a problem? This is a theme of a lot of horror movies and stuff, right? So what's the problem with all of your desires coming true?
Well, didn't you say before that if you picture yourself as a loser or something, then all of a sudden you start winning, you can't handle it or something like that?
Yeah, that's part of it. So it's not matching of the self-image to reality.
But I think people have an idea of what would make them happy, and when they come to find out the thing they thought would make them happy, and they get it, it doesn't make them happy. They just kind of lose their mind.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then so it's sort of, you know, like at least you've got your hopes and dreams to orient you, and then if somebody gives you your hopes and dreams, then you get lost and you've got no reason to live because you still aren't happy. Now what?
Maybe life's natural balancing act is if everything's going well, there's got to be something that kind of brings you down and crash. So I
Okay, just a sort of lurking law of cosmic irony.
Cryptic.
Yeah.
Still plausible.
Or like the Midas thing, right? Where it's like he wanted everything he touched to turn to gold, and then he found out he couldn't eat anymore. Yeah. I'm thinking more. These are all completely right, but I'm just thinking of like whims and desires. Like how many times do like I wish that a loved one was dead, or a plane would crash, or in the heat of passion, like yelling at someone who cuts me off on the road that I hope your whole family dies slowly of something Noma, in front of your face, and and then like afterwards, because like I feel like I might be the only one, but I feel like I can do a fairly good job of monitoring my behavior, but so far as monitoring my desires, I think it's a little unreliable. And if my desires were coming true without me having to put in work and stuff, I think this might be a problem. Like feeling humiliated. I wish I was dead. Oh, well, there goes your wishing career. Like if you start thinking about it, and there's horror movies about this, especially Stephen King milked this, but the thought of wishes coming true involuntarily can actually be kind of terrifying. So think how the way that nightmares are actually are actually fantasies, and so just if your nightmares come true, that sucks, right? Nightmare. Do you know what nightmare is from? The word. The original nightmare was the mare was the they call them sleep paralysis dreams now. It's when you part of your brain wakes up but you're still in REM paralysis, and it's shallow breathing, so it feels like your chest is being covered. Anyone had this sort of?
It's the worst thing you could ever.
Yeah, it's horrible. And but so the nightmare was this witch-like figure that came and allegedly sat on your chest and brought nightmares. Because the mare was the
demon painting of it from the.
Yeah,
medieval ages. It's horrible.
Yeah.
You wake up and you try and move and you can't, and you're fully conscious.
Yeah, even if like if it happens to you once and you never forget it, it's just it's happens to me every morning. I can't tell you about it. It's funny though. Why do I get in just the silly mood thing, and then you start giggling, and everything turns into anywho. But if any of you have spent any time in the English department here, you are familiar with Freud's short essay of the uncanny. Is anyone familiar with Freud's short essay of the uncanny? His essay on the uncanny is not really a case history. He sort of just thinks about this feeling of uncanny. You know what uncanny is? What do we just? I want to know the popular conception of uncanny. So you're disqualified because you're familiar with the essay. What's uncanny?
Like unimaginable.
Okay, yeah. Can you give me an example?
You popping out of a bush telling me I'll be the
No, like your mom popping out of a bush and telling you you're going to do the Donut King of Wisconsin and then disappearing would be uncanny, because it's if I think of Abe and then he calls me, right after, and she's like, "Whoa, man, I was just thinking about you." That's something that's uncanny, right? But ultimately, what Freud was into is he was the German word for uncanny is unheimlich. And since none of you speak German, I can pronounce it any darn way I want to. But the non-negated, Heimlich version of it means home and comforting. But if you look at the etymology, it also means unfamiliar and completely alien. So so this is something that, again, horror movies use a lot of. The idea of the zombie loved one, like especially a child, like your little daughter is a zombie. This is an uncanny thing. It's completely alien and completely familiar, and this is the thing that really gets you if you're into the classic. Turns out the world's foremost expert on zombies is a product of our film program. It's the product of our film program. World's foremost expert on zombies.
What do you get for being the foremost expert on zombies?
A tenure track position at Utah Southern Chippewa State. The market's tough, man. So the idea is it's at once it's familiar, but it's also hidden and revealed. So the relevant thing is when he gets into it, the part of the uncanny that I want to talk about here is the idea that apparently it's an infantile idea that we're controlling the world with our minds, which is supposedly this narcissistic wish. When you were a kid, did you ever think that like the moon was following you when you're driving along? And I don't know if these things are universal, or like the Truman Show thing where you feel like the whole world's playing a joke on you. So these are these narcissistic infantile wishes. I hope they're not that infantile. The moon's following me, man. Like superstitious people. So if you believe in curses, I have a grandma that just freaks out when I curse people. When I yell that I hope that somebody blanks Coach Krzyzewski's daughter to death. During the March Madness. My grandma gets really upset for some reason. Because she thinks that there's this magic of curses and thoughts. So superstitious rituals, the Force from Star Wars, thinking about somebody and they call, etc. Is this idea that your brain is really attuned to reality and sort of like serious, like really otherwise really smart thinkers and scientists still believe in this, like this, about like the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and the collapse of wave functions, about this stuff. All right, well, you can't stop me. I digress. So the really, really short version of the wave function is quanta don't really, the subatomic particles that make atoms, they behave however you're testing for them. If you test them to behave like a wave, they behave like a wave, and they have like and they're just sort of a place. But if you make a little slit in a cardboard box and shoot a photon through there, even though it's a wave that sort of exists everywhere, it'll shoot through and like just make a hole. So it's both a wave and a particle depending on how you look at it. And then so the idea is once it's the wave is perceived by an observer with human or human-like intelligence, it coalesces into a particle. And then so the idea here is, like when you're from the 60s and you spend a lot of time doing LSD and now you're a neuroscientist, you start thinking, you know what, man? This means that we like build reality when we look at it. It's like reality is like a product of my brain, man. And then so these people, publish because you can't really disprove it, but it's not true. But it's a powerful line of thinking, this magical thinking. So anytime that something happens in the world that reinforces an infantile wish, be suspicious of it because it's probably your infantile wish talking. Can anybody move stuff with their brains or their minds? Would be awesome. We're gonna. This is gonna be a huge thing in the Winter's Tale, but so we can talk more about quantum physics there. So so now we're still on page 12, and then so he's wrapped again, right? And then then Macbeth does this aside: if chance will have me king, why chance may crown me without my stir. And we remember from our discussion of comedy and chance that was like his comic outcome, right? That was his chance to make this a comedy. So if you recall, Lysander and Hermia's memorable exchange about the laws of literary comedy, you remember that? Back to Midsummer Night's Dream. And then so the course of true love never did run smooth, so they're reading the fact that there's an obstacle to their love, a sign that it's going to turn out okay. And then so they banter back and forth about the laws of comedy. And then eventually it's just like, all we have to do is wait, and there's going to be some crazy stuff, and then we're going to have a happy ending, right? And Macbeth, apparently has read some comedy. He thinks about it. It's like, maybe chance will have me king. That's interesting. Friar Lawrence in Romeo and Juliet says the same thing. That's why Romeo and Juliet die, because they don't just sit there and wait. So is it Friar Lawrence? Yeah. And so his advice is just, hey, just cool out. It'll all blow over. You're in a comedy, man. Chill out. But they don't. They force it, and so there's a tragic ending. So the sort of the idea, the sort of literary convention here is that anything you do to try to interfere with fate will turn out bad. Bless you. Okay. So now we go to Lady Macbeth's first reaction. Page 15, I think. Yeah. Scene 1, or Act 1, Scene 5. So he sends Lady Macbeth this letter, right? So let's I don't think we need to read it aloud. She's just reading the letter, walking around. Good. So he's like, yeah, these really hot bearded chicks came up to me. I mean, they weren't really hot, but these bearded chicks came up to me and they're like, hey, dude, you're gonna be the Thane of Cawdor, you're gonna be the king, And so he sells their mystical qualities. Talks about how they just disappeared. And so if you get a letter like this from your significant other, how would you react? You get a text message at 2 a.m. Sure.
Oh my God, it's crazy talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, was anybody here who'd be like?
Yeah. Like, where are you at? What are you doing?
I'd have to see their mental state in person.
Yeah, what they call the insane route, and the thing that Banquo thinks happened. Yeah, I don't. This has actually happened to me. No, my mom jumped out of a bush. Yes, ma'am.
But wasn't magic and all that stuff considered to be just as real as religion was? And they thought that religion was very, very, very real. So wouldn't they have been like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're told this, right? And this is sort of and I'm sure you've learned it from a completely reliable source, and everybody slides on back to it, but. As it turns out, that the way that we believe, the cultural conditions of belief change, so what we believe in can change a lot from culture to culture. But it turns out that the sort of fervor that we believe with, what aspects we believe in, whether we can kind of consider it a symbolic set of guidelines in the background, or if like we're good like Pauline, sell all of our things because the apocalypse is coming, and like Jesus was resurrected and nothing else matters. These are more genetic dispositions, which would probably mean that there was probably roughly about as many true believers then as now. So you've got a sort of telling, and you see it in Shakespeare's characters. Like they're all almost all of them are Christian nominally, but you see a whole different spectrum of beliefs. And now I'm saying this controversially. There's a lot of people that have gone to school a lot longer than I have that have they wrote these articles. They're very ingrained with it. They may well be right for all I know. My reading of the material and my understanding of the way that humans work say that probably as many people believed in fairies and witches then as they do now. It was a more accepted part of culture and discourse and stuff, but yeah.
Like your grandma.
Like my grandma. Poor grandma. She makes really good collard greens. You wouldn't think that you would like collard greens, but you would. So, man, this is just see, it's because I'm like, I've got to get through all this material. I've really got to go down. It's nothing but digressions. And then how does she react to it? Let's look. Maybe we should read this. Can I get a Lady Macbeth? All right, so start at Glannis and end with Intermessenger.
Glannis, thou art, and Cawdor, and shalt be what thou art promised. Yet do I fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness. To catch the nearest way, thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. What thou wouldst highly, that wouldst thou holily, wouldst not play false, and yet wouldst strongly win. Thou'dst have great gladness. That which cries, thus thou must do, if thou have it. And that which rather thou dost fear to do, than wishest should be undone. Hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear, and chastise with the valor of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden realm, which fate and metaphysical aid doth seem to have thee crowned withal.
Thank you. So somebody want to give me the gist? I'll give myself the gist. So she gets the news. First of all, she completely believes it. Credulous creature that she is. Secondly, like her first thing is, yet I do fear thy nature. It's too full of the milk of human kindness. So the idea is that Macbeth is too holy and too nice to take this opportunity and get. And this is her first initial reaction. So what I want to ask is, would Macbeth have predicted her to react this way? Why would Macbeth send that letter?
Well, in the history thing, in the history version, he would have known that she was an heir, so I don't know, maybe he just wanted to see her opinion. Maybe he would have.
Okay, so we'll take out the history version and just wants to see her opinion on it. Yes, sir.
So she was trying to unsex herself before his arrival.
Right. So, but I guess what I'm getting at is so they've been married, and we know that they're pretty happily married because Steve told us, and Dr. Orzel, you want to say something?
I was gonna say it all seems like when you can't believe something is really true, that you have to go tell someone else to make it true.
Right.
And
So
then
then somebody has to believe you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. If the witch thing happened to me, I'm not sending that text. I'm not writing that. So unless say there's a really nice jacket that you want, and you can't really afford it, right? And you know that it's the wrong decision, that you shouldn't buy the jacket. And you start asking people, hey, but this is, and you start presenting the case, and and then you call your mom, and then your mom, because she knows stuff, and she's like, man, just buy the jacket, you deserve it. And then all of a sudden it's cool, right? So you're looking for somebody else to prod you, to give you the spur, as Macbeth would say. So I want to put out there the hypothetical possibility that Macbeth knew damn well how she would respond to it, and that's why he sent it to her, because he knew that he didn't have the oats to do it himself. But if he got her cooking, then that would get him cooking. So this is if he were versed in heuristics and rhetorical strategies, this partial investment thing is a good way to do it. So you start kind of you start imagining yourself with millions of dollars, or as the queen, and then or as president, right? And then you start actually investing, and then you get your acquisition bias, because once you have something, it's worth a lot more than before you have it. So for example, both Mitt Romney and Daniel Krumbo lost the presidential election of last year. But one of us is a lot more upset, right? That's because he had invested all of this psychic time and energy imagining himself being president. So when he didn't get president, even though he, like I, never was president, it still felt loss, right? So he's setting it up. So Lady Macbeth, and she brings it up later, why would you tell me this if you're not going to do it, right? So it's really again, I've got a great personal story, but I'm not going to do it. No. card. So and then we've got the great unsexing thing, right? Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here. And oh no, let's go back. Let's go back. Sorry, jumped ahead. The wrong card threw me off. A couple of things I want you to notice from the bottom of what Abe read. Pour my spirits in thy ear. What does that remind us of? Those of us that have read Hamlet. I mean, pours the poison in the ear was allegedly how the and then she's got the valor. Remember valor from the opening Bloody Man's description. It was Macbeth's valor's minion against the female fortune. So she's got the valor of the tongue, and she wants to help along fate and metaphysical aid. Thou seem to have crowned withal. So wants to help fate along. So Lady Macbeth, you'll notice, is on board as long as you're helping fate along. But when Macbeth tries to change fate, that's when Lady Macbeth goes off, and when things go from pretty disturbing to really effed up. So and then the other thing that I want to pay attention to, we go up a little bit. So she says, yet I do fear thy nature is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. Thou wouldest be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness, circle illness, should attend it. Also circle kindness. But thou wouldest highly, thou holily, wouldest not play false, and yet wouldest wrongly win. So we were talking about psychotics, and even just evil. Forget about the sort of medical diagnosis. So her values, to me, don't seem that messed up, because she calls kindness kindness. She calls what she wants, what she's proposing, illness, right? Her value system's not, and then sort of condemns him for acting holily, doing the right thing holily. But if she's evil, you're not going to look at doing the right thing as being holy. It's going to be wussy, right? And so, and you know, like because her tune about it changes when she knows he's listening, right? And she wouldn't say you're acting too holy. She'd say you're being a weenie, you know, like get a pair, you know, almost exactly. And so this is weird to me, because this is not the rantings of someone with an inverted value order. This is not somebody that's divorced from the social norm. This is not this. She's fully immersed in the social norm. And then the unsex me thing. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. So why does she need to do this if she's evil? Like she's suppressing something or something, right? She needs to flood the feeling out of her. She's not unfeeling and cold and heartless and psychotic. She hates that she's not. You know, and we used to call this penis envy, you know. But you know, I think we should just call it Macbeth envy. But she's really, for probably some you know, compelling reasons, if we could get into her case file, you know, she really just wants to, you know, crush her emotions, you know, and not because she doesn't have any, but probably because they're so and you know, she's hyper emotional. She feels too much. She's crazy compassionate. All right. So and then also when she's committing the crime, you remember she has to get drunk to do it, right? So again, you know, like back when I was in a gang, we used to call this geeking yourself up to commit a crime that you didn't have the heart to otherwise, right? And then she fails, although she's able to clean up. So the question is this: is Lady Macbeth a studio gangster? All that talk, woof, 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 comes down to it, and pees her pants and runs off to the corner. Sort of. She doesn't behave like the heartless psychopath that can sit there and she's not like the kind of person that will sit there and, you know, like cut a cat open and be like, oh, I'm like, you know. No, she's like, oh, maybe you're my dad. Or maybe not the cat, maybe so. All right, page 20. All right, Macbeth's wuss speech. If it were done when 'tis done, and 'twere well, it were done quickly. So this is actually true. My dad was a Navy SEAL, so growing up, I hung out with a lot of SEALs, and the only advice I remember them ever giving me was like, you know, he who hesitates is lost, and don't think, do. So, you know, like I'm doing all this crazy stuff, you know, like rock climbing, going off waterfalls and kayaks and all this stuff that I would never do, because if you think about it, you know, no rational person would do this nonsense. The idea is just to go for it, and Macbeth's trying to. So apparently this sort of masculine logic runs deep, because Macbeth's doing it here. And then Macbeth kind of proves that this is true because he starts thinking about it, which he's prone to do. And what happens as soon as he starts thinking about it? Yeah, hesitates, just flat out talks himself out of it. There's no good reason. You don't have a rational argument here. You know, I have no spur. And then Lady Macbeth's wonderful reply. Can I get a new Lady Macbeth on the next page, 22? You know, reading is a good way to get the to bring up the end of the participation points. So for those of you that haven't yet embarrassed themselves.
Starting from where?
Line 35.
Was the hope drunk, wherein you dressed yourself, hath it slept since, and wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time such I count thy love. Art thou afeared to be the same in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cat in the adage?
Prithee, peace! I dare do all that may become a man, who dares do more is none.
What beast was then that made you break this enterprise to me, when you durst do it when you were a man, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more than a man, nor time nor place did then adhere, and yet you would make both. Now have made themselves, and that their fitness now dost unmake you. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from its boneless gums, and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this.
Thank you. Now I really like this, because Lady Macbeth really gets to the heart of the matter. You know, calls him a wuss, and wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely. Now, he says sickly, and you know, conventionally people say that you're like hungover, but a green sickness is what she's really referring to. And green sickness was what they called it when virgins were getting married, and when they were dreading the consummation of their wedding vows. It's called virgin green sickness, because they would be thinking about it, and you know, like and become, you know, green with I don't know, disgust, whatever it is, allegedly. So she's calling him a little virgin girl. That's cool. Calls him afeared, calls him a coward. You know, questions his potency. Then you were a man. You know, this is cool stuff, right? And then you know, one thing that I've learned in life is that as soon as you're verbally defending your manhood, you've already lost. But the thing I want to look at in Lady Macbeth's reply to Macbeth's wavering resolution is this whole buck up. So another thing that I've noticed about the giving and taking of advice is that you know, we were talking about people who ask for advice. Now let's talk about people who give advice. And I've noticed in my experience, I'm sure that it's just because I am myself am a derelict and deal with nothing but derelicts, so you guys have probably had a completely different experience. But when people give me advice, they're always talking to themselves, even though they don't know it. You know, what they're doing is they're giving themselves advice, and they're telling them what they need to hear, and oftentimes what they really do need to hear. But, you know, like, so they're talking to themselves at you, and so you're just like, So sure enough, Lady Macbeth is taking the whole logic from her unsex me speech, and now is giving it to Macbeth. Except for he needs to get sexed. I can't prove this that everybody's giving advice to themselves scientifically, but I'll figure out a way. So this is and then it of course works, right? So. And it seems like that she's pretty unsexed, but there's some weird things too. The one thing is that the famous "I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis love the babe that milks me." So so this is good. We picture our little Freudian baby, right? And then just on her own accord, see, I can tell you guys don't have babies because you would have laughed. I wonder if this can be used against me in a court of law.
You are taping it.
Uh-oh. It was the perfect crime. But so it seems like a pretty horrific act, right? Can we agree? So and it's supposed to be, right? What she's trying to do is she's trying to like give the most horrific act that she can conceive of, right? This is called availability bias. So if I ask you the most horrific act you can conceive of on 9/12/01, you know, what are you gonna tell me?
Something 9/11 related.
Yeah, right. And so what this tells me is that she's been spending a lot of time thinking about nursing a baby, and her horrific act par excellence is a dead baby. And so what this means that to me, possibly, is that this is evidence that she misses her baby really bad. And this is the thing that she's thinking about, and she's having a really hard time getting over this. And maybe that's related to the feelings that she's always trying to crush, and she's just kind of doing a shotgun approach to emotion. Instead of dealing with her loss of her child, she's blaming her emotions rather than the situation. Poor Lady Macbeth. But, you know, like I said, Macbeth's in a pickle in either way, because you know, there's nothing as pathetic as some guy explaining to you how manly he is. But no, really, man, you know, like I backed off, but, you know, man, if I wasn't, you know, it wasn't for my knee, you know, there would have been some different stuff. But it's a good thing we have this break coming up. The point is that getting themselves to do this crime was no small thing. These aren't just, like Bonnie and Clyde that just sort of knowingly look at each other and go in and handle business, right? This is requiring a lot of complex emotional buildup and mutual prodding. They both seem to know themselves and each other very well. Now, neither thinks that their own will, or for Lady Macbeth, her nature, or her sex, will be sufficient to prompt them to act. Instead, they create a situation that causes them to react to each other and to the circumstances in a way that they couldn't muster by sheer willpower. So they're prodding each other to setting off a chain of events, so they prod each other into committing the act, because neither one of them can just do it. So we call these Ulysses contracts. Anybody familiar with the concept of a Ulysses contract? Right, the prototype Ulysses contract is they were going by the sirens that have this incredible song, right? They're on the ship, and the sirens are, and they have this song that's so good, the music is so dope, that when you hear it, you sail to them, and you run up on the rocks, and you crash and you die, but it's really, really good music. The problem is that so what he does is he sticks a bunch of wax in his crew's ears, and then ties himself to the mast, and then commands them to not listen to him no matter what, and to go within hearing distance of the siren so he can hear the song and yet not everybody die. So this is a Ulysses contract, knowing that you cannot trust yourself in the clutch, but creating a situation that will make it so you have to.
That's
So,
a question.
what's that?
That's a question.
Right. So the classic example is these the Christmas accounts that banks used to do. They just had this really stupid idea that anybody that knows anything about finance would just think was idiotic and nobody would go for it. The idea was that you'd put money into an account all year long, and then you couldn't have access to it without a heavy penalty until December, and then you could use the money to buy presents, right? Because you can't trust yourself to save up for December. Now, this is really stupid to do if you're a banking customer, because you can put it in interest accruing account, so you can invest it, and it's way better just to behave rationally. But people don't trust themselves. They know that they're gonna buy stuff all year and be broke on Christmas. So this turned out to be this really, really successful thing, and a tribute to human stupidity. I probably would have done it, but so this is something, if they're creating this sort of mutual prodding Ulysses contract to get themselves in a position to where there's no going back. That's a lot of things, but I don't think it's psychotic per se. Maybe? Am I building a case slowly a little bit? All right, let's go to the murder. 2-2, page 27. Lady Macbeth's drunk. She whistles out. He looks like daddy. But they're in trouble now. I mean, they're already broken in. So as per the situation dictates, so Macbeth goes and hath done the deed. Came through when he needed to. But he's going around, not like a psychotic. This is a sorry sight, Lady Macbeth. A foolish thought to say a sorry sight. And So consider it not so deeply. These deeds must not be thought of after these ways, so it will make us mad. This is Lady Macbeth speaking. So what's Lady Macbeth's advice about it? Don't think about it.
She's a hypocrite. She's not one to talk. She couldn't even do it herself.
I know. She's and then Macbeth starts whining, and this is another dynamic of their relationship. When Macbeth acts unmanly, she picks up the slack, right? So when she's at her most hardcore is when Macbeth is failing, and when Macbeth isn't failing, she just becomes just kind of a flat out hysterical schoolgirl, huh? But to me, Lady Macbeth's advice shows that, again, that this is her strategy in relating to losses. It might be a good advice. I don't know. When something horrible happens, I mean, what's the like how would you deal with a catastrophe? What's your strategy?
Panic.
Yeah. So panic, but then you're in grief. Are you from the school of, because there's two schools of thought, right? There's the don't think about it, and then there's the wallow in it, right? And you rolled your eyes. That's awesome. Yeah.
I'll make a decision about how bad the situation is.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of there's it's kind of like a joke or anecdote or whatever. I don't know. Basically, a guy goes to the doctor and goes, every time I walk, my foot hurts. So the doctor says, oh, just don't walk. So that's basically her advice to him. It's like every time I think about it, I drive myself crazy. And she's like, well, don't think about it. It's not solving, it's avoidance.
Yeah. So in the clinical data, I like that you're using jokes as examples. I want to encourage everyone to do that. But they used to think that you're not supposed to repress traumatic memories, but then it turns out that you can't. Sorry for those of you that learned otherwise. There's no such thing as repressed traumatic memories. But at the same time, thinking about stuff. Then they used to think, well, just write about it, and then you'll organize it into narrative meaning coherence, and you'll get better. Well, that doesn't always work. Sometimes people just get lost in their little traumatic narrative. So her advice might be right. I don't think it works for her though, right? Like she doesn't seem, she seems to be like the least capable person ever of getting over things. So let's go to 3-2-4-14. We gotta cook. Page 46. All right, so she's lamenting about getting what she wanted and how that just made things worse. Oh, tragic irony. But again, bucks up when Macbeth enters and repeats her "stop thinking about it" mantra. But also, like she's pretty clear about this. She says on line 35, "You must leave this." Like what's done is done, but do no more. Right? So she's officially off board. And again, the Macbeths don't get into real trouble until they start trying to change the prophecies. But after they leave this, she's demasted by that, right? Macbeth just treats her like like the way that a Scottish king is supposed to treat his wife. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And you can show up to the victory party. But all right, so let's go to the dinner scene. Fast. Love the dinner scene. Depending on how you play it, you can play it different ways, obviously. So this is when Macbeth has the meltdown in front of all the dinner guests. I call it pulling a crumbo. But and then so if you play it so like Polanski did, where Lady Macbeth comes and whispering to him, I prefer just the really super uncomfortable version of her yelling, "Oh, these flaws and starts impostor to true fear would well become a woman's story at a winner's file." Just calling him a little girl in front of all company. This really awkward girl's pat. Like, be a man. This is like this is Macbeth, the baddest ass on the planet, right? But I think that this works a lot like the play within a play of Hamlet, for those of you familiar with Hamlet. So in Hamlet, he stages a play within a play that stages the murder as was told to him by the ghost of the father, and then he was going to watch how the murdering king reacted to it. But here, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth play themselves, and sort of out. I have that Macbeth comes out of the crazy closet and lets everybody know what was really going on during those silent raptures, and so that's funny. But we have to keep going. 66. So this is where he finds out that everything is going completely to putt. And Macduff has fled to England. And so we're on 4-1-144. And so he's upset about this. And then he says, "From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. And even now, to crown my thoughts with axe. Be it thought and done. Be it thought and done." So his solution to this, as he figures that the problem he's in now is because he's been thinking too much. He sort of internalized the Lady Macbeth logic. Now, you and I might think, no, Macbeth, this isn't because you've been thinking too much. But no, he's going strict with this. So now he wants to, thought and act is one. So he's blaming himself because he should have killed Macduff as soon as he had the idea to, and he waited, and now everything's gone to putt. So he just banishes thought altogether. And so his solution is just to act immediately off of impulse. Mark that passage. Okay. Let's go back to 34 just to remember something, which is 2-3-94. All right, so this is when Macbeth discovers that Duncan's been killed, his public admission of what happens. He says, "For from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of." So what he's saying is that because the king is dead, and because such a thing could be done, that life is actually meaningless, because the whole divine great chain of being order that's that constitutes the whole world picture can be violated. Just the fact that the king can be murdered in this way shows that life has no meaning. It's just all a big farce. And this is, most people play this as he's just being hypocritical, right? He's putting on a face, and he really doesn't believe it. But he seems to really believe it, and he seems to take this to heart, and he behaves as if life has no meaning after this. And then we get to the famous 5.5, page 90. Okay. All right, I'm going to read it aloud. This is the queen dies, and he gets the news. She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty place from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death, rather. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Now, I had the great experience of when I was an undergrad. Our teacher made everyone in the class memorize this. And so for 2 class periods, we just heard this over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm telling you right now, it is effed up. And it will, if you spend too much time on this, it will get to you. It seems kind of corny and gloss over it, but when you start prying it apart and you hear it over and over again, this is the thing that drives people who study Macbeth. I mean, literally, people go crazy studying Macbeth. But so the tomorrow, like think about everything that tomorrow is supposed to solve for you, right? It's promised everything, but that's just somebody else's yesterday, and they're all dead, and nothing means anything. This is his ultimate justification for acting: is that life is completely meaningless. Sometimes famous quotes are famous for a good reason. But this, I think, is why the play really is terrible, even though it's over the top and cartoonish at points, and like really kind of silly and slapstick. Now that the real tragedy is that even tragedy is stupid and pointless and meaningless, right? And it doesn't have dignity, and it's just meaningless. It's all meaningless. And I don't want to go on. We're out of time. So I'm not going to. Yeah, I am. This last the quiz that you had today will not. The material will not be on the test. Yeah.
On the test, is it like can you broken up by each play, or they're all like mixed together?
I'll count it.
He was a steward, not a king.
Yeah.
No, he'd have been king. He would. I mean, it's a qualified king because yeah, you're sort of right but sort of wrong, because like the real king would be his son.
I'm arguing for us to the point.
You got the point. I'm kind of a pushover, I guess. Did the historical Macbeths have children?
Yes.
What makes you feel like a man?
Murder.
You should try it. What happens to Lady Macbeth when she succeeds at making a man of her husband? When, in relation to marriage, do Shakespeare's tragedies take place? Why does... see, I'm getting married this weekend. Why does Orgel think that our version of Shakespeare's play is the result of more authors than just Shakespeare?
Sorry, say that again?
Wait.
Because it was an unpopular play, so people wanted to lighten it up.
Did he say a lot of
I mentioned that the critics said, that one guy had seen the play, written something about it, and saw it again, and said that it was much improved. And I mentioned the inclusion of the divertissements.
Yeah, that'll work.
Isn't there like things from other
Wasn't
stories?
2 of the songs performed by the witches, don't they appear as famous after the play would have first been performed? I think that's what it says in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's any sort of this sort of evidence will be. Actually, can you put your computer away? Thanks. We have that no computer policy allegedly in here. Why, historically speaking, is the difference between a virginal birth and a cesarean section significant? Yeah, I guess that's in there. Yeah. It's amazing how everybody reads the same article and nobody reads the same article. Yeah.
Was it the play making the point that that Malcolm needed someone else to do the dirty work for him while Macbeth was acting out of bounds?
I think that's my interpretation. So I'm tempted to agree with that one.
So wait, so he could stay clean, he had like someone do the dirty work?
Well, I mean, it was the kind of we were talking about in class about how it's you have three different styles of kingship. There's the independent, kind of rogue Macbeth, and then there's the utterly dependent sort of infantile Duncan, and then there was Malcolm who's savvy, who got other people to do, his killing and stuff for him, but was controlled knowledge and that sort of thing. Yes, sir.
So Lady Macbeth was the real heir to the throne, is that right?
That historically, yeah.
What happened, so how long did Macbeth actually reign, like in real life?
I forget. It was longer than but how long does he reign in the play? There's this weird sort of no time that, like it could be 2 days, it could be a year, it's really hard to tell. Yeah.
The play is a divestment. I said because the songs are supposed to be like sung and dance in the witches scenes.
Does that seem right to you guys? Seems right to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. All right, as Queen Victoria said on her wedding night, let's get this over with. Yes, sir.
I said that by presenting them as ambiguous in gender, it puts them on equal footing with men.
I like that. I think that's smarter than what's in the article, but I'll accept that. You could tell he was. What I got from that is that he's kind of an old school guy, and then the old school guys during the '80s took a beating from the feminists, so they all had to throw in little cookies to their feminist colleagues in their article to keep them from jumping on them. I have a feeling that was one of those moves. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Why is Lady Macbeth as much of a problem as the other woman? Number 14.
Why is Lady Macbeth as big of a problem as the other women? Yes, sir.
She was disruptive.
Specify.
He couldn't go and serve as king if because he's at home taking care of his wife and kid.
Yeah, that's the problem as women. It's not necessarily whether they're seducing you or heaping responsibilities on you. Yes, sir.
Who killed Macbeth in battle historically? I know that it's Malcolm,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't quite figure out why Shakespeare gave credit to Macduff. I thought something about keeping Malcolm like as a king sort of clean of the act, but.
Yeah, that was something that the article wasn't clear on. That's kind of a thinker for you. Something like that might be on the test, so it's worth chewing on and trying to figure out a possible reason for that. Yeah.
I thought the article said something about like Malcolm was tainted by women and Macbeth isn't, so he acts as an agent for Malcolm.
Well, but Malcolm's not tainted by women, and Macduff is, though, right?
He's not, he wasn't a woman born.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Major difference between performances? Song and dance. What character in the play is King James a descendant of? Historically speaking, who killed Macbeth? Historically speaking, who would rightfully have been the king at the beginning of Macbeth? Uh-oh. Who would have been king?
Duncans.
Macbeth! Because he's married to Lady Macbeth. And Lady Macbeth can't be the king.
That was
Question. I thought you put king on
Literally
purpose.
everyone in the class answered.
Yeah. She was
That's at least half a point.
dirty.
Oh. Yeah. Was that?
Well,
I guess it must have been tricky if it fooled you. Well, I'll see. If most of you got it wrong. All right, I'm starting 15 seconds before class because we have a ton to do. First thing, there seems to have been some confusion about the essay portion of the exam. That you can, in fact, actually do it at home, right? So you don't have to memorize your text evidence lines and stuff. So everybody clear on that now? Any other questions about it? Because hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end of class to talk a little bit more about the exam, but I doubt it. Any other questions at all? Meaning of life? All right. All right, so let's, nice short article for a change, huh? Clear, to the point. It'll, I actually didn't do that on purpose, but I was gonna cancel the whole thing, but I looked at the article and I was like, they can do this. This will take an hour. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
What reason, number 9, what reason did Orville give for Shakespeare changing the character of Banquo?
He was related to
Did you get that?
No.
He was related to James, who was the king at the time. Yes, sir.
Who did Orville think revised Macbeth after 1614? Was that David?
Does anyone know? Somebody else.
Just someone not Shakespeare.
Yeah, someone not Shakespeare.
Okay. 20, oh wait, never mind, I answered that, never mind.
All right. Yeah.
How do the witches open up a space for women?